Hello everyone and welcome to our next lesson. Just a reminder that I originally developed this course for the BANGTAN Academy Discord community, so if you'd like to find out more, please follow them on Twitter at @BangtanAcademy_, so you can get access to other materials and make friends to study with. You can also find me on Twitter at writer_court or on thebtseffect.com. Hello and welcome to Chapter 5 of Learn Korean with BTS. We're going to get started here on page 96. So as per usual, go ahead and scan that video either right now or after the lecture and do that exercise real quick and use the second part of this page to listen and write down what you hear. So I recommend going back with your language pen, but I will go ahead and read these vocabulary words really quickly. So we have this time we're focusing on food, which is 음식 in Korean. So they've given you a few different foods here, the ones at the top: kimbap, kimchi, 샌드위치. So of course, 샌드위치 is sandwich, just the English word written in Korean. Kimchi is of course kimchi, just different. There's different types of kimchi, but everyone pretty much knows what that is. And then kimbap, which is kind of like sushi. It's wrapped up vegetables, sometimes meat, but it's called kimbap in Korean. So then on the bottom half of the page, we have 밥, 라면, 불고기, 비빔밥, 떡볶이, 빵, 햄버거, 사이다, 콜라, and 커피. So those are the first one. It just pop is rice, so cooked rice. I think if you use the language pen, it tells you cooked grains, which that's true, but mainly just cooked rice. And pop can also mean just food in general. So if someone asks you, 밥을 먹어요, like have you eaten? That doesn't mean have you eaten rice or have you eaten cooked grains. It just means have you eaten food in general. So pap means rice, but it can be used just in general for food. So keep that in mind because I do think that comes up later in this chapter. So ramen, of course, ramen, I think it tells you instant noodles in the language pen. 불고기, which I think they tell you is barbecued beef, which that is true. It's of course not like we would think of as American barbecued beef. I've also heard it described as like braised beef, depends on how you fix it. Bibimbap is like mixed rice, and it's mixed usually with vegetables and sometimes with meat and with, usually some sort of sauce, which is mainly red pepper paste, I believe. You can probably add other things to it, but I've usually seen it just with red pepper paste and then an egg on top. Tteokbokki is spicy rice cakes. Bang is bread. Hamburger, of course, hamburger. So then we have saida and cola. Now these are two different types of soda. Basically, if you use the language pen, it's going to tell you the first one is Sprite and the second one is Coke. And that's, pretty much true, but cola can also be other colas, not just Coca-Cola, but like Pepsi Cola. It's that type of soda, and then Sprite Haida is like the other, not dark soda, I guess. So it's not necessarily only Sprite and only Coca-Cola. And then of course, 커피 is coffee. So moving on to page 98, this is our key expression. The first one for chapter 5 is 에서. And I think I covered this briefly in a previous lesson because we learned but we didn't cover 에서 at the same time. So this is kind of an extension of that lesson, I guess. So you see here, the format is blank 에서 blank 을 blank 아요 어요. So I've written it in English as to blank blank at blank, which looks a little funny, but it'll make sense when we put some words in here. Basically, you are putting the location particle 에서 against a place where some sort of action happens. So we learned 에 already, which is a location marking particle for verbs like 하다, 오다, and 있다, 없다. So it's for going to a certain place, coming from a certain place, or existing or not existing at a certain place. So in contrast, 에서 is a location marking particle for other verbs, and it's indicating the place that a specific action or activity happens. So if you want to use another verb like 먹다, for example, you're not going to use you're going to use 에서. So these are some example sentences that they've given you on page 99. So the first one here is 에릭은 식당에서 밥을 먹어요. So that's what I was saying, like, if you want to use 먹다, you can't use you have to use 에서. So 식당에서, at the restaurant, 밥을 먹어요, eating food at the restaurant. That I wouldn't translate as eating rice at a restaurant. I would just translate it as eating food at a restaurant. So 식당에서 밥을 먹어요, eating food at a restaurant. And then the next one, 저는 편의점에서 빵을 사요. So I buy bread at the convenience store. So 사요 is to buy, and it's happening at the convenience store. So 편의점 as the location takes 에서, and then the object that you are buying, so 빵, and the object marking particle, and then the verb. So 저는 편의점에서 빵을 사요. The next one is 이자벨은 카페에서 커피를 마셔요. So we have, our subject with 는, and then the location that the action is taking place with 에서, the object that is being acted upon, and then the verb. So Isabel drinks coffee at the cafe. 이자벨은 카페에서 커피를 마셔요. So the last one is 마르코는 공원에서 산책을 해요. So 산책 is a walk, and of course 하다 conjugated to 해요 is to do something, so to do a walk, aka take a walk. So 마르코는 공원에서 산책을 해요. So on page 98, this is the first part of the conversation that they give you. The first person says, 한강공원에서 무엇을 해요? So what will we do at 한강공원? So that is 한강, which is Han River, because 강 is river, and then Han is just the name of the river. So Han River, 공원, Han River Park. What will we do at Han River Park? And the second person responds, 자전거를 타요. So we will ride bicycles. 그리고 라면을 먹어요. And we will eat 라면. And that 그리고 part is a sentence connector that just means and. So it's an easy way to, extend your sentence. As a beginner, it's a lot easier to extend with this word, this connector, instead of trying to connect your verbs. So just put 그리고 in anytime you want to further elaborate or add an additional action. So then on page 100, we get the second part of this conversation. The first person is asking the convenience store clerk, 얼마예요? 얼마예요? Which means how much is it? So like how much is the total? And then the employee responds, 5,300원입니다. 젓가락은 저기 있습니다. So this is our key expression point here, is this new conjugation. So we've already learned yo form, and now we're learning 씁니다 form. So of course that translates to the cost is 5,300 won, and he's saying that there are chopsticks over there. So taking a look at 씁니다 form, I've written here 씁니다 as well as just a 비읍 and then 니다, because it's going to depend upon what the verb ends in, which one you'll use. So for short, you can just call it 씁니다 form. This is more formal speech than yo form. So this is used when you meet someone for the first time. It's used a lot on the news, presentations, customer service roles, and then other formal situations. So if you notice in this conversation, the employee uses 씁니다 form, but the customer uses yo form. The customer can also use 씁니다 form, but because the person working there is the employee, they have to be more polite, and so they're using the 씁니다 form. But either person could use it, and it's not rude to use yo form in that situation. But yeah, so if someone is working, they're more likely to use 씁니다 form, and of course, if you're giving some sort of presentation and you need to be in a more formal situation, or you're talking to someone that you just have never talked to, it's more polite to use 씁니다. So if a verb ends in a consonant, you use 씁니다. And if a verb ends in a vowel, you just use the 비읍 to end it and then 니다. And for 리을 irregular verbs, you're going to drop the 리을 and add the 비읍니다. And for ida, it just changes to imnida. So I know the pronunciation looks like ip nida because the biip is there, but due to pronunciation rules, the biip is actually going to sound like a mium, so it's going to make an m sound, so it is imnida. So these are the examples taken from page 101. So the first one is just 있다, which changes to 있습니다. So we have 있다, you take off the da, which is dictionary form, take that part off, it ends in a consonant, so you add 씁니다. 보다 is the next one, ends in a vowel. If you take off ta, you're left with that vowel, so you add the biip to the bottom, and then 니다, so you end up with 봅니다. The next one is a real irregular verb. So 만들다, take off the da. You're also going to take off real and then replace it with the biip and then add nida. So we end up with 만듭니다. And then, like I mentioned, ida changes to imnida. No matter if your name, for example, if your name ends in a consonant or if it ends in a vowel, you're still going to use imnida. So for the example sentences, we have 여기 콘서트표가 있습니다. So here is a concert ticket using the 씁니다 form. 콘서트표 is concert ticket. The next one is 자말은 달려라 방탄을 봅니다. So Jamal watches 달려라 방탄 or Run BTS. The next one is 소피아는 한국 음식을 만듭니다. So Sophia makes Korean food. So we have the word 음식 there that we learned earlier in the slides. And if we put 한국, which is Korea, in front of 음식, it becomes Korean food. So you can also do that with different countries and foods. So for example, America is 미국. So if you want to say American food, it's 미국 음식. And then the last one is 저는 포라입니다. So you're going to use imnida no matter what your name ends in, consonant or vowel, it's just going to be imnida. And then there's also a note here for the question format of this level of polite conjugation. So 씁니다 is going to change to 씁니까 and 비읍니까. So an example here is 소피아는 한국 음식을 만듭니까? And you're going to raise your tone at the end with the vowel, not the vowel, the verb, and the ka, that is basically your question marking particle. So you're going to raise the tone to make it a question. So you can make it a sentence and say 소피아는 한국 음식을 만듭니다. But if you want to ask if Sophia makes Korean food, change it to 만듭니까 at the end. So there's also a note on the bottom of page 101 that says you use the 씁니다 form for other types of verbs in Korean. So we haven't really gotten into this yet, but there are two types of verbs. In Korean, we have descriptive verbs and action verbs. And from what I can tell, descriptive verbs are going to be covered in chapter 6. So I won't go into it here, but they do give you a couple of examples. So at the first one is 빵이 맛있습니다. So 빵, of course, bread. Add the subject particle 빵이 맛있습니다. So if you were to write this in yo form, it's 맛있어요. That means delicious, to be delicious. And so this 맛있다 is not an action verb. It's not, you're not doing an action. It's describing the noun. So it's a descriptive verb. I know that's a little confusing, at least for native English speakers, because if we were to say that in English, we say this bread is delicious. Delicious is not a verb. It's an adjective. So it's a little different, but verbs and descriptive verbs, which are kind of like adjectives, go at the end of the sentence in Korean, so they get conjugated. The second example is 옷이 예쁩니다. So to say that in yo form, 옷이 예뻐요. So we haven't covered these descriptive verbs yet, but 예쁘다 is pretty. So the conjugation is 예쁩니다. So we'll go into the actual details of conjugating those verbs into like yo form in the next chapter, but that is a note that appears in this chapter. So just a heads up that this 씁니다 form is used for both. There are some different conjugation rules for yo form for descriptive verbs, but that's just a heads up. We'll get to that in chapter 6. So now for the full dialogue on page 102. First person says, 한강공원에서 무엇을 해요? So what are we doing at the Han River Park? Second person says, 자전거를 타요. 그리고 라면을 먹어요. We're going to ride bicycles and eat ramen. And then next, the first person says, 우리 같이 편의점에 가요. 우리 같이 편의점에 가요. So of course there we're using 에 instead of 에서. And this new word here is 같이, which means together. So 우리 is us, so us together, going to the convenience store. So we're going to the convenience store, or sort of the implication is let's go to the convenience store together. So the second person responds, 좋아요. 편의점에서 라면을 하고 삼각김밥을 사요. So 좋아요 is to be good or to be nice, and it's a very common response. Like if someone makes a suggestion or asks if you want to do something and you say 좋아요, that means that's good for me, let's do it, kind of is the implication there. So it's perfectly fine to just say 좋아요 or 좋습니다 if you want to conjugate it to that form. And then 편의점에서 라면하고 삼각김밥을 사요. So 에서, because 사요 is being used. So let's buy ramen and 삼각김밥, which is triangle kimbap. So it's like, you can see it in the picture in the earlier conversation. It's just a little triangle shaped kimbap. It's wrapped in seaweed. So then the first person says 얼마예요? How much is it? And the employee responds 5,300원입니다. 젓가락은 저기 있습니다. So it's 5,300 won, and the chopsticks are over there. There is a short second dialogue on page 103. Their instructions are listen and read aloud, so I do recommend reading it aloud and listening with the language pen after this lecture. I will read it here first. So the first person says 시장에서 뭐 사요? So 에서 being used because 사요 is being used, and that's not, existing at a place or going to or from a place. So what do you buy at the market? The second person responds 두부하고 과일을 사요. So I buy tofu and fruit. And then that person says 저기요, 사과하고 배가 어디에 있어요? So she's asking an employee, saying excuse me by saying 저기요, and then saying where are the apples and the pears. So apple is 사과, pear is 배, and also to note, 배 is one of those fun words that means multiple different things. So it does mean pear, but it also means stomach, and it also means ship. So depending upon context, you might be getting different things there. So, and then the employee responds 저기 있습니다. So they're over there. And remember that 저기 means away from both of us. So they would be saying it's over there, away from both of us standing here. On page 105, there's a little note that I wanted to be sure to cover really quickly, and that's just this difference between 하고, 과, and 와. So 하고 means with or and then 과 and 와 also mean that. And you're going to use 과 with something that ends in a consonant, and you're going to use wa with something that ends in a vowel. So it's a little bit backwards than other things because the consonant goes with the consonant, and the empty, the ing circle consonant goes with the vowel. So just remember that the kwa goes with words that ends in a consonant, and wa goes with words that end in a vowel, and hago can go with either. So the difference really that they're illustrating here with these sentences, the first one is 보러와 대는 쇼핑을 합니다. And then it's equal, or it's an equivalent expression to 보라 하고 대는 쇼핑을 해요. So the difference here is yo form versus 습니다 form. So it's more common to use wa or gua, whichever one is applicable, in a more formal situation. So if you're using 습니다 form, which is more formal, it's just more common to use the more formal particles. And then if you're using yo form, which is still polite but less formal, it's more common to use hago, which is less formal than gua and wa. And so that first sentence, 보라하고 대는 쇼핑을 해요. So that's Bora and Dan as the subject go shopping. So Bora and Dan go shopping. The second sentence varies a little bit because it's 보라는 dan과 쇼핑을 합니다. And the yo form equivalent, 보라는 dan하고 쇼핑을 해요. So that changes the subject a little bit from, 보라하고 Dan, so Bora and Dan go shopping, to 보라는 dan하고, so Bora goes shopping with Dan. It's a slight difference. It doesn't, make a huge difference in these sentences, but just pointing that out, that one is saying Bora and Dan go shopping, and the other is saying Bora go shopping with Dan. And then the difference between 과 with 합니다 and 하고 with 해요. And I think maybe the other thing not mentioned earlier in the chapter is that 하다 verbs just turn into 합니다. So they don't have any sort of change there. It's just 합니다. So that's it for the chapter 5 lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.